My name is Ian Foster, and I'm the Owners Director at the Greyhound Board of Great Britain, otherwise known as the GBGB. If you're watching this, it's probably because you've either bought or are thinking about buying a racing greyhound, probably the greatest breed of dog in the world, and each one an amazing canine athlete. Whichever it is, we're hoping that this short presentation will help you in your ownership journey. So please sit back, read and listen to what we're putting forward, and enjoy your greyhound as much as we all have done. As you can see, I've been involved in greyhound racing for a very long time. I've owned dogs since the early 1980s, and that's one of the reasons I was elected to represent owners on the GBGB board. I run a syndicate so that people can enjoy greyhound racing just as much as I do. It's called the Duff Syndicate. And if you look at the pictures on your screen now, you'll see one of the new additions. This is Otto. No Duff Sahara is his racing name. And on the left, you'll see a picture of lots of happy smiling faces. These are some of my co-owners when Otto won his first open race, and they're being presented with the trophy that attaches to that. And take it from me, one of the greatest thrills of greyhound ownership is when your dog wins and you're at the track and you're presented with a trophy. So we want to tell you a little bit more about greyhound ownership. And as this caption says, why get involved? To have a dog of your own, to love, to watch, to follow is really as good as it gets. So is it all the one-way street? Is it all the dog giving to you? Well, no, it's not. When you're an owner, you also have responsibilities. We have to make sure that the dog is well looked after during its racing career and thereafter. And in some of the slides that follow, we'll tell you a lot more about that. We'll also tell you how to become an owner if you haven't already done so. GBGB is the regulator for licensed greyhound racing in Great Britain. We're the only UK sports regulator to be accredited by UCAS in recognition of the systems we have in place across our sport. Everything we do is to support the highest standards of welfare and integrity. But what does that mean? Well, we license trainers and kennel hands, as well as veterinary surgeons working at tracks and the racecourse staff themselves. We oversee over 200 rules of racing, which cover every aspect of our sport, including how greyhounds are cared for during their visits to a track, at home at their trainers' kennels, when being transported, and into their retirement. We monitor the welfare of greyhounds at their trainers' kennels, as well as on their visits to the track, meaning GBGB racing greyhounds actually receive far more protection than domestic dogs in the UK. We have a robust anti-doping programme as part of our commitment to ensuring a clean, fair sport for all and protections for our greyhounds. And we also work with STRI, who are the world-leading experts in track surfaces, to maintain the best possible running surfaces for our canine athletes. Our approach is summed up in our Greyhound commitment, which sets out how welfare sits at the heart of our sport. But we're also building on this further with our long-term welfare strategy, A Good Life for Every Greyhound. This peer-reviewed strategy is comprehensive and wide-ranging. It seeks to further optimise the care and protection racing greyhounds receive throughout their lives, not just the period they are racing. It covers every stage of a greyhound's life, from breeding and rearing to their racing years and retirement. You can read more about it on our website, and I would encourage you to do so. So, why buy a racing greyhound? Ownership of a greyhound and watching it run is something you can do very much as a group. You can do it with friends, you can do it with your family. And being at the track and watching your dog run and win sometimes, it's something that's collectively wonderful. Over my years, I've been involved individually with friends and in syndicates, and it brings a great deal of joy to everybody, not just personally to watch a dog run and win and grow up and retire, but to do so with your friends and family is really a special thing. That leads me very much on to how you get involved in greyhound ownership, and there are three ways of doing it. If you're the sort of person who likes to do something on your own and be completely in charge, then you can own your greyhound in your sole name, and on the race card your name will appear beside its name. If you want to do it as a small group, that is up to 4 of you, you can own a greyhound in a partnership, and your 1, 2, 3 or 4 names will all appear as owners on the race card. If there are more of you, however, more than 4 but unlimited in number, then you can own your dog as part of a syndicate, and that's what you can see in the picture on the right hand side. There could in theory be thousands of you, and the advantage of a syndicate is obviously the more of you there are, the less you each have to pay. And whilst you probably won't all go to the racecourse at the same time, a lot of you probably will, so you've got the camaraderie and friendship of all being there together. But sadly, it's not always possible to get to the track. For instance, I can't get there very often, but there are other ways of watching your greyhound. You can watch it sometimes on television, depending on which meeting is being broadcast, and there are all sorts of streaming services which are available for you to watch online. For those of you who are new to the sport, there may be quite a lot of language that isn't familiar. So here we're going to very quickly take you through some of the terms that you will hear. We obviously want to make sure that your greyhound runs against appropriate other greyhounds. After all, some are a little bit faster than others. And so when your greyhound arrives at the track, the racing manager will let it have a couple of trials. That means races with a smaller number of dogs, so he can see how quick your dog actually is. And depending upon those, he'll put it in what we call a suitable grade. And the grades are numbered from 1 being the fastest to 8, 9, 10, or even 11 being the slightly slower grades. Your dog will run in an appropriate numbered grade, and if your dog wins, he will advance to the next grade upwards. If after several races the dog hasn't won, he'll be dropped to a slightly lower grade to give him a better chance of winning. If your dog progresses very well to the higher grades, there's a different type of race available, and that's called an open race. That can take place at any racecourse throughout the country, and there are literally thousands of races where the top performing greyhounds at each track meet to race amongst themselves. The picture you saw earlier of Otto was Otto having won his first open race, and we were so proud when that was the case. So these are some of the terms you're likely to come across when you go racing or you read a race card. Your greyhound will give you a huge amount of fun and enjoyment during his or her racing career, and quite possibly during retirement as well. But it's not a one-way street. You have to be a responsible owner and give back to your greyhound as well. You may also have to make some payments on its behalf that aren't part of your normal monthly arrangement. As an example, I tend to have my greyhounds scanned every 2 months to check for the tiniest niggling injuries that might otherwise develop into something slightly more serious. You'll certainly have to pay for medications, as you would with any other dog, such as for worming and flea treatments. GBGB responsible homing policy, which you can read in full on our website, is something that you need to follow to make sure that there's a suitable plan, not just for the racing life of your greyhound, but for his or her retirement as well. At GBGB, we have a series of welfare initiatives in place to ensure that your greyhound is properly treated at every opportunity. Most racing owners choose to take their greyhound home with them upon retirement, and we very much encourage you to do so, but that isn't always possible for everybody. And so we introduced a thing called the Greyhound Retirement Scheme. When you register your greyhound, you'll be asked to make a contribution of £200, and that amount of money will attach itself to the greyhound throughout its racing career. When it comes time to retire, we at the GBGB will match that with a further £200 when your greyhound is transferred to an approved homing centre. And that goes towards the costs of keeping the greyhound there until such time as that centre can find its forever home with a family elsewhere. Very, very occasionally, your greyhound might suffer a career-ending injury. It doesn't happen very often, but in the unlikely event that it does, we introduce the injury recovery scheme to ensure that everybody can afford to give their greyhound the best possible treatment. Enjoyment of your racing greyhound doesn't end when their racing career ends. As I said previously, many owners choose to take their greyhound home and continue as a pet. Greyhounds make the most wonderful pets. You can get an awful lot out of your greyhound in its retirement. Many owners like to visit the kennels on a Sunday during the racing career, and they form such a close bond with their dog. That bond can then continue through its retirement in your house, and you can simply have wonderful times together. Many of my syndicate members over the years have taken their greyhound home with them, and they've got just as much enjoyment from that phase of their life as they have from their racing careers. So, if you haven't already done so, how do you become an owner? Firstly, you decide whether you want to own the dog on your own, with up to 3 other people, or as a syndicate. And it really is important that you know how much you want to spend. If you're a syndicate, how much do you each want to put in, and therefore how much do you have available as a total? And then you go and find a trainer. This really is the best way to get into ownership. You can find a trainer in many different ways. Maybe you have friends who are already owners and have a trainer. Maybe you live not too far from a racecourse. Each racecourse will have a list of the trainers that operate there who are attached to it. And probably the best way to do it is to speak to the trainers individually. You can do that over the phone, or you can go along to the racecourse and speak to them in person. And that way you can generally work out who you think suits you, who you get along with. And once you've found your trainer, you tell them how much you have to spend, and they will help you to find your greyhound. Many trainers have greyhounds in their kennels who are available for sale. If there isn't one, then they will look elsewhere. They might look in Ireland. They might look at other contacts in this country. They might go to an auction sales on your behalf. But one way or another, they will find an appropriate greyhound and they will check with you that it's what you want. As soon as the greyhound arrives in their kennels, most owners can't wait to go down there and say hello. There are some forms to complete. If you're an individual, you'll need to do it. If you're in a syndicate, whoever is appointed to be the head of the syndicate will do it on your behalf. You might decide to stick with the greyhound's current name, or you might decide to give it a new name that suits you or your circumstances. All my dogs in my syndicate are called No Duff something or other. It's something I like to do. It's something that's available to you if you want. As I said, the racing manager at your local track will put your greyhound into a series of trials to ascertain how good it is and to make sure that when he or she runs, she does so against appropriate opponents. You can watch your dog trial, sometimes live. You might even be able to watch it on one of the streaming services that we've already mentioned. But when your greyhound is ready and the racing manager has assigned a grade, your greyhound eventually gets to run. And there is nothing like going to the track or watching online the first time your animal springs from the traps and completes its race. So there we are. Hopefully this short presentation will have given you some helpful information as to how to get the most out of your greyhound ownership and your greyhound journey. There are lots of people that you can speak to give you extra help and advice if you think you need it. Speak to your local racecourse. They're more than happy to do that. Speak to other owners. You may not know them personally, but approach us and we can give you the details of some people who will be only too happy to help. And if you want to read more, well, the GBGB website is available to you at all times. There's lots of information there, all aspects of ownership, rules, regulation, and there'll be something there for everybody. We can only welcome you to the greyhound ownership world. You're going to have a great time like we all do. But if there's anything you need to know, please don't hesitate to ask.